Good evening. How's everybody doing? Good to be learning with you on a rainy, wet, cold Sunday in LA. Hope the weather's better by you. Let's light up the darkness. And no matter how cold it is, we're going to warm ourselves up by the fire in our hearts for learning Torah. Yehud in South Carolina, Bill in Missouri, Bella in Florida, Paul in the Great Northwest, Nancy in North Carolina, Melissa in Great Neck, Guy in Ohio, Ella says Shalom, Marjorie in Georgia, Joe in the Inland Empire. Welcome everybody. Our daf is page 93. Here in Tractate Bava, Kamma, the 21st volume of the Talmud, continuing our discussion of Mishna number 5 in chapter 8. And today, with God's help, we'll complete chapter 8 and open chapter 9. Mishna number 5 basically said that even if you pay damages after injuring another person, particularly if you humiliate them, you're also going to have to apologize before we would say that the matter is concluded, lest you remain guilty in the eyes of heaven. Also, somebody tells you, hey, cut off my hand, and you do it, you're going to be liable for cutting off the person's hand, even though he told you to do it. But if he says, tear my clothing, and you tear his clothing, you're going to be liable for tearing his clothing. But if he says, tear my clothing on the condition that you will not be liable for tearing my clothing, then you won't be liable for tearing his clothing. But if he says, cut off my hand on the condition that you will not be liable for cutting off my hand, you will nevertheless remain liable for cutting off the hand. That's what the Mishnah held. We're on page 93a near the top. And in the Gemara, in discussing this Mishnah, we learned about the situation of Abraham, and or they were Abram and Sarai, I believe, at the time, when they needed to go into the kingdom of Avimelech. And they knew that Avimelech was likely to kidnap Sarai, and would kill Abram if he was her husband. So they said he's the brother. And then God cursed the household of Avimelech and told him, this woman that you took into your household is actually the wife of this man who is a prophet. Return her to him, and he will pray for you. And that's what happened. And from this we learned that Avimelech basically apologized for what he did to Abraham, and Abraham forgave him, which is another thing that we need to learn, that we learn from our Mishnah. So continuing the discussion of that incident. In connection with the incident of Abraham and Avimelech mentioned in our Mishnah, the Gemara quotes, that's right, so that was even in the Mishnah. Not just in the Gemara. So, but in relation to this, the Gemara quotes a related statement. Rabbi Hanan says, one who passes the judgment of another to heaven is punished first, as it is stated in that incident. And Sarai said to Abram, my wrong be upon you. I gave my handmaid into your bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between me and you. So this wasn't to do with Avimelech, but rather Sarah was barren, So we got this idea that after Abraham prayed for Avimelech's household to have their, orifices unstopped, as it were, and they, among other things, started giving birth again in that household, that prayer was also answered for Abraham and Sarah. But it wasn't right away. It took some time. So Sarah was at a pretty late age and was barren, and she thought she wasn't going to have children. So she thought, all right, I'll be built up through my handmaid Hagar, and sort of gave her female slave to Abraham to father a child with, and that was the birth of Ishmael. But I guess Sarah, regretted this course of events. It didn't work out well. Hagar became proud and haughty and not submissive as a slave now that she had had a child with her master, while her mistress, wasn't able to do that with her husband. And so Sarai said to Abram, "The Lord judge between me and you. Maybe you should have done that, even though I told you to do this." But this idea of the Lord judge between me and you, right? That you're unhappy with somebody and you can't, get satisfaction or work it out. And so you say, may the heavenly court judge you for that which you've done. So here we're learning in this Gemara that is not a recommended course of action. Because when you submit somebody else's wrongs for judgment in the heavenly court, as it were, you're opening the books, right? Not only on that person and their deeds, but on yourself. And says the Gemara, unless you are 100% sure that you've never done anything wrong, the last thing you want to do is say, that heaven should judge you, because then your deeds are going to be examined, and perhaps you'll be found wanting, and it won't go so well for you. So says the Gemara, Sarai stated that God should judge Abram for his actions. And it is written, and Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her, meaning that at the end of their lives, Sarah died first. So a little bit attenuated sort of causal link, but still they're going to use that, that connection of incidents in the stories of Abraham and Sarah to make the point, right? To make the point. As we've seen all through yesterday, that they're looking for Torah sources for something that to the sages was just kind of obvious, right? It was kind of common wisdom that you don't ask heaven to judge other people, and they're using this as the Torah source for it. And the Gemara comments, and this matter applies only in a situation where he has someone to do judgment for him on earth and has no need to appeal to the heavenly court. Right? Now you can say, God, please help me. God, please, enable people to come and save me. God, please enable, God, please open the eyes of the judges, in this court case that I'm going to bring, so that everything should go in a manner that is just. There's certainly, you should pray. No one is saying that you shouldn't pray. But if you have some, you have to do what's called your hishtadlus, right? So if you have a method on earth to achieve justice, well, you have to use that method and don't submit your case to heaven. But if there's no other way in the world for you to get justice, then it won't be so, then that's outside the scope of this teaching, right? Then you won't sort of curse yourself to be judged first, as it were. Now, concerning this, Rabbi Yitzchak says, woe to he who cries out to heaven more than the one about whom he is crying out. Same idea. If you submit, right, to heaven that heaven should judge someone else, woe unto you. And the Gemara comments, this concept is also taught in a Baraisa. Both the one who cries out and the one about whom he is crying out are included in the verse discussing the cries of an orphan who is mistreated. If you afflict them, for if they cry at all to me, I will surely hear their cry. My wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you with the sword. Exodus 22, verses 22 and 23. But they are quicker to punish the one who cries out than the one about whom he is crying out, as in the incident of Sarai. Now, the Gemara provides another lesson from the story of Abraham and Avimelech, and Rabbi Yitzchak says, the curse of an ordinary person should never be regarded as light in your eyes. For Avimelech, who was not a prophet, cursed Sarah, and it was fulfilled in her descendants. How do we see this? The curse on Sarah was, as it is stated, behold, it is to you a covering of the eyes, Genesis 20:16, meaning that he said to her, since you concealed your status from me, that you were Abraham's wife, you said you were his sister. I'm sorry. Since you concealed your status from me and you did not reveal that Abraham is your husband, and you caused me this suffering, right, that everyone in my household and our orifices were blocked up, well, then may it be God's will that you should have children with covered eyes. And this curse was fulfilled in her descendant, as it is written, and it came to pass that when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, right? So eventually Sarah's son, Isaac, later in life, was pretty much blind. And that's why the whole incident of Jacob and Esau and Jacob pretending to be Esau was possible, because Isaac, could barely see. Now, Rabbi Abahu says a person should always be among those who are pursued and not among the pursuers. And one can prove that this is so, as none among birds are pursued more than doves and pigeons, as all the predatory birds hunt them, and cats as well, etc. And yet, from all the birds, the verse deemed them fit to be sacrificed on the altar. Seems like that's such a great reward. They're prey in the animal kingdom, and they are the birds of all the birds who are offered as sacrifices. Okay, but it is an honor for an animal to be brought up as a sacrifice. So they're using that as a proof text. In other words, don't be among the people who exploit others, right? That's what they're saying. Now, the Mishna teaches, our Mishnah number 5, with regard to one who says to another, blind my eye, or cut off my hand, or break my leg, and he does so, the latter is liable to pay for the damage, even if the injured party explicitly instructed him to do so, on the condition that he will be exempt from payment. But if one instructs another to damage his property on the condition that he will be exempt from payment, then he is exempt, right? So you can instruct somebody to damage your own property, telling him that he will be exempt from payment, and he will be exempt from payment, but you can't tell somebody to cut off your limb, even if you say he will be exempt from payment. He will remain liable. Why? Because we don't believe somebody when they say, cut off my hand. Like, they couldn't possibly want that. Something weird must be going on with them, and we don't accept that statement. So Rav Asi Bar Kamma said to Rava, what is different in the first clause, right, that you can exempt someone from paying damages for destroying your property, but you can't exempt them from being liable to pay damages for destroying your body? And Rava said to him, in the case of the first clause, he is liable, despite the fact that he was instructed to carry out the injury on the condition that he would be exempt, because a person does not forego compensation for damage to his extremities, such as his eyes, his hands, and feet, as mentioned in the Mishna on page 92a. And consequently, when he told the assailant that he would be exempt, the presumption is that he was not sincere. And Rav Asi Bar Kamma said to him, but does a person forego compensation for his pain when he doesn't lose a limb? As it is taught in a Baraisa with regard to one who said to another, strike me or wound me on the condition that you will be exempt from payment, he is exempt. So according to Rava's reasoning, he should be liable in this case as well, as the presumption should be that he was not sincere. Rava was silent, as he did not have a response. Rava said to him, have you heard anything with regard to this matter? So Rav Asi Bar Kamma said to him that this is what Rav Sheshes said. It is because loss of a limb may result in a family flaw, i.e. it may cause harm to the family name. One who loses a limb not only suffers pain, his family suffers as well. He is not in a position to forgive the assailant for the harm caused to his family, but he may forego compensation for his own pain. Consequently, if he instructed another merely to injure him without causing loss of limb, on condition that the assailant will be exempt from payment, then the assailant will be exempt. it was stated that the Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara, disagreed concerning the explanation for the ruling of the first clause of our Mishnah. Rabbi Oshaya says it is because loss of a limb may result in a family flaw, as we just explained. And Rava says it is because a person does not forego compensation for damage to his extremities. And Rabbi Yochanan says there is a yes that, based on other factors, is like a no. Right? A yes that is like a no and is not viewed as giving consent. And conversely, there is a no that, based on other factors, is like a yes. And although one said no, it is as though he gave consent. In this case as well, where he said on condition to be exempt, he was not sincere. And the Gemara comments that this is also taught in a baraisa with regard to one who said to another, strike me or wound me. And the other asks, is this on the condition that I will be exempt from payment? And the first one said to him, in the tone of a question, yes. This is an example of the principle, there is a yes that is like a no. It is as if the victim asked, if I give you permission to do it, do you think that I would forego compensation? By contrast, if one said, tear my garment, and the other asks, is this on condition that I will be exempt from payment? And he said to him in a tone of a question, no. And then this is an example of a no that is like a yes, since he meant to say that if he did not want to exempt him from payment, he would not ask him to do it. New subject. The Mishnah teaches that if one instructed another, break my jug, or tear my garment, and the other did so, he is liable to pay for the damage. And the Gemara raises a contradiction from a baraisa. The verses state with regard to bailees, right? People who are entrusted to take care of something, either the unpaid bailee or the paid bailee. So if a man delivers to his neighbor money or vessels to safeguard, Exodus 22:6, and if a man delivers to his neighbor an ass or an ox or a sheep or any beast to safeguard, from Exodus 22:9, and the sages derive from these verses that the bailee is liable if the item was given to him to safeguard, but not where it was given to him to destroy. If it was given to him to safeguard, but not where it was given to him to tear. If it was given to him to safeguard, but not where it was given to him to distribute to the poor. And this indicates that a bailee is not liable for damage to an item if he was told to tear it, even if the owner did not state that it is on condition to be exempt, right? So what they're saying is, based on this verse, where the Gemara is challenging the idea that if you say tear my garment, you remain liable if you tear it, and the only way you're going to be exempt is if I say tear my garment on the condition that you will not be liable to pay damages, then you would be exempt. But from this, it seems like, well, a bailee is only a bailee who has to safeguard something for the purpose of safeguarding, but if he is told to destroy or to tear, then, he's not going to be on the hook for that. So Rav Huna said, this is not difficult, as this Mishnah that obligates him to pay for the damage is dealing with a case where it came into his possession, and he was responsible for it before the owner instructed him to tear it. Therefore, even if he was instructed to tear it, he is liable. And that baraisa, which exempts him from paying, is discussing a case where it did not come into his possession, but he simply tore it. And Rabba said to Rav Huna, but the phrase in the verse, to safeguard, which obligates a bailee, indicates that it came into his possession already. And this is the case of the baraisa that rules he is exempt. If he is a bailee, it was placed in his possession. So rather, Rabba said this and that are discussing a case where it came into his possession, and yet it is not difficult. This Mishnah is discussing a case where it came into his possession as an item given for safeguarding, and he is exempt if the owner stated explicitly that this will be the case. And that baraisa is discussing a case where it came into his possession as an item given for tearing, right? He was hired to tear it. That's why it came into his possession. So the Gemara relates there was a certain purse full of charity money that came to the city of Pumbedisa, and Rabbi Yosef deposited it with a certain man. And that man was negligent in safeguarding it, and thieves came and stole it. And Rabbi Yosef deemed the bailee liable to pay compensation for not guarding this purse of money that was meant to be distributed to the poor. And Abaye said to Rabbi Yosef, but isn't it taught in a baraisa? To safeguard, yes, a person is liable, but not where it was given to him to distribute to the poor. And this seems to teach that with regard to money that is distributed to the poor, there is no law of safeguarding. Right? In other words, if you tell somebody distribute this money to the poor and then, he loses it, he's not going to be liable for it. And you could say, well, wow, that's terrible. I mean, that money was given to him to give to the poor, and now the poor aren't going to get it. But if you hold him to too high a standard of safeguarding, then maybe nobody's going to want to be entrusted with that job, and the poor won't get it anyway. And Rav Yosef said to him, the poor of Pumbedisa have an amount that is set for them to receive. Each poor person already had a specific sum designated for him, and accordingly, it is in the category of to safeguard. He was acting as a bailee, not as a charitable distributor, and therefore he is liable. And that concludes chapter 8. All right, so just to read that halacha, if one who received a deposit of funds in order to distribute them to the poor, or for the ransom of prisoners, was negligent, and as a result the funds were stolen, he is exempt from liability. And the Havat Yair adds that he is liable according to the laws of heaven. He is exempt in a case where the money was not deposited with him for distribution to the poor of a specific location or to ransom specific prisoners. If the money was designated for specific people to receive specific sums, then he has the status of a bailee, and if he was negligent and the money was lost, he is liable. If the charity collector told the bailee to watch the money for him, then he is like any other bailee, and it doesn't matter that it is being used generally in the distribution of charity. And now we move on to chapter 9. And before we open chapter 9, let's read a couple of paragraphs from the Torah that are going to be relevant. So Leviticus 5, verses 20 through 26. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, if anyone sin and commits a trespass against the Lord, and he defrauds his counterpart with regard to a deposit, right? So somebody who embezzles, for example, or with regard to a pledge that he didn't pay, he made a pledge and didn't pay, or with regard to a robbery, someone who robs, right? And as we see, as distinguished from a thief, right? Because a thief is more brazen in a sense than, a thief is more brazen with respect to God than a robber. A robber robs openly, and he's not afraid of man or God. A thief who sneaks around and steals shows that he is more afraid of people than of God, who sees everything, and that's why the penalty of the thief is even greater than the penalty of the robber. But to continue, or with regard to a robbery, if he exploited his counterpart, or he has found that which was lost and deal falsely with it, right? If you find something that's lost and it's possible to return it, then your obligation is to return it, not keep it. And one who swears to a lie, right? He says he found it and he should have returned it, but he swears that it was stolen from him when it wasn't. In any of all these that a man does, sinning therein, then it shall be, if he has sinned, right, if he has committed these sins, and is guilty, then he shall restore that which he took by robbery, or the thing that he has gotten by oppression, or the deposit that was deposited with him, or the lost thing that he found, or anything about which he has sworn falsely. He shall restore it in full, and shall add the fifth part more to it, the 20% penalty. Unto him to whom it appertains shall he give it, right? Give it back to the owner, in the day of his being guilty, right? So this is going to apply when he is, found guilty by a court by the testimony of witnesses, as opposed to one who just, confesses without being caught. He doesn't have to pay the fifth. He does have to restore what he took, but he doesn't have to pay the fifth. And he shall bring his forfeit unto the Lord, a ram without blemish of the flock, according to the valuation, for a guilt offering unto the priest. And the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord, and he shall be forgiven concerning whatsoever he does, as to be guilty thereby. Right? He stole from someone else, so he has to return what he stole, plus the fifth, and his account is not square with the Lord, as it were. He will have to bring this guilt offering. Of course, that was only possible when the temple was standing. Another passage from Numbers 5, verses 5 through 7. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, when a man or woman shall commit any sin that men commit, to commit a trespass against the Lord, and that soul shall be guilty. Then they shall confess their sin that they have done, and he shall make restitution for his guilt in full, and add unto it the fifth part thereof, and give it unto him in respect of whom he has been guilty. But if the man have no kinsman to whom restitution may be made for the guilt, the person he stole from, let's say, has died in the meantime and does not leave an heir, the restitution for guilt that is made shall be the Lord's, even the priest's, besides the ram of atonement, whereby atonement shall be made for him. If there's no way to make restitution either to the one he stole from or to his family, then he'll make a donation to the temple treasury. Okay, we're on 93b, chapter 9, Mishnah number 1. In the case of one who robs another of wood, and he fashions the wood into vessels. Or, now the problem you see is you have to make restitution of what you stole. But the thing that you stole, now you put all kinds of labor into that raw material and turned it into a vessel. So the wood you stole is now in a beautiful bowl that that has been shaped and lacquered, shaped, sanded, lacquered, signed. You made a piece of art out of it. It's worth much more than the original wood. But you have to make restitution. So what are you going to give? Are you going to give that bowl, the wood that you turned into an expensive bowl, or not? Right? That's the question. So one who robs another of wood and fashions it into vessels, or one who robs another of wool and fashions it into garments, he pays the robbery victim according to the value of the goods at the time of the robbery. But he need not return the vessels or garments that he fashioned. He has acquired the stolen items because they have undergone a change. You still have to pay the monetary value of what you stole, what it was worth at the time you stole it, plus the fifth. If one robbed another of a pregnant cow, and it then gave birth while in his possession, or if one robbed another of a ewe, E-W-E, that was laden with wool, and the robber then sheared it, the robber pays the value of a cow that is ready to give birth, or the value of a ewe that is ready to be shorn. He pays the value of the animal at the time of the robbery, and the calf or the wool remains his. If one robbed another of a cow, and it became pregnant in his possession, and it then gave birth, or if one robbed another of a ewe, and it became laden with wool in his possession, and he then sheared it, then the robber pays according to the value of the animal at the time of the robbery. And this is the principle. All robbers pay according to the value of the stolen item at the time of the robbery. Now, you might have thought, well, you took a pregnant cow, and now it gave birth to a calf while it was in the robber's possession, and you're going to pay the owner of the cow the value of a pregnant cow, right? But you don't have to give back the calf. Now, the owner of the cow will say, well, if you hadn't stolen it, now I would have a cow and a calf. Instead, you're giving me the value of a pregnant cow. Why should I lose because you stole? And that's a good argument. But I think the counter argument is that the Torah, meaning God, wanted to incentivize robbers to regret their crime and to make it a little bit easier to make atonement, so that they would make the atonement. If they make it, if the hurdle is too high to make restitution and to make an atonement, then fewer robbers will take that painful but beautiful step of going back and getting themselves back onto the the good path. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. The sages say it can be inferred from the Mishnah that if one robbed another of wood and fashioned it into vessels, yes, the robber acquires the wood due to the change. But if he merely sanded the wood, no, the robber does not acquire it, as this is not a significant change. Similarly, if one robbed another of wool and fashioned it into garments, yes, he has acquired the wool due to the change. He's going to have to make monetary restitution plus the fifth, but he can keep the wool that he turned into a sweater. But if he merely washed the wool, then no, he has not acquired it because it's not a significant change. And the Gemara raises a contradiction to this statement from a Baraisa. If one robbed another of wood and sanded it, or stones and smoothed them, or wool and washed it, or flax and cleaned it, he pays according to the value of the stolen item at the time of the robbery. And this baraisa teaches that even a change such as sanding wood is regarded as a significant change. And Abaye said, this does not contradict the Mishnah. The Tana of our Mishnah teaches the law with regard to a change deemed significant by rabbinic law, which is not deemed significant by Torah law, as it is reversible. And all the more so if the robber effects a change deemed significant by Torah law, i.e. an irreversible change, he acquires the stolen item due to the change. And the Gemara explains, so accordingly it must be that the case in the Mishnah where the change is reversible, where one robbed another of wood and fashioned it into vessels, it is stated with regard to one who robbed another of sanded wood. And what are they? Boards that the robber used to construct the vessel, which is a change in which the item can revert to its original state. Let's say he took sanded boards and built a bookcase out of them. Okay, you could take apart a bookcase and give the boards back. It's possible. Which is a change in which the item can revert to its original state, as if the robber desires, he can disassemble them. Similarly, the case of one who robbed another of wool and fashioned it into garments, this refers to wool that was already spun, as fashioning them into garments is a change in which the item can revert to its original state, as if the robber desires, he can unravel them. And the Mishnah teaches that the robber acquires the stolen item by making these changes, and all the more so the robber acquires the stolen item through a change deemed significant by Torah law. You can unravel a sweater, right? But you can't, turn spun wool back into raw wool. So that's actually the bigger change. Abaye continues his explanation. And the Tana of the Baraisa teaches the law with regard to a change deemed significant by Torah law, but it does not teach the law with regard to a change deemed significant by rabbinic law. It is possible that he maintains that the robber does not acquire the stolen item due to such a change. So Rav Ashi stated a different answer. He said the Tana of our Mishnah is also teaching the law with regard to a change deemed significant by Torah law. In the case in the Mishnah of one who robbed another of wood and fashioned it into vessels, this is referring to one who constructed pestles, which is analogous to the case mentioned in the Baraisa where one sanded them, since a pestle is formed by trimming the wood in an irreversible manner. And similarly, the case in the Mishnah of one who robbed another of wool and fashioned it into garments, this is referring to one who fashioned the wool into pieces of felt, which is an irreversible change. So the Gemara asks a question with regard to the Baraisa, but does washing affect a significant change so that one who robs another of wool and washes it, acquires the wool and pays its value at the time of the robbery? And the Gemara raises a contradiction from a Mishnah that discusses the laws of the first of the sheared wool, which must be given to a priest. In Tractate Chulin, if the owner of the sheep did not manage to give the sheared wool to the priest before he dyed it, he is exempt from giving it to the priest, as the obligation is in effect only with regard to wool remaining in its original state. Right? This is like teruma. That very interesting, right? You know that if you have a field and you harvest the field, let's say of wheat, you have a pile of wheat, and then you count how many kav of wheat, whatever the volume of wheat is that you gathered. I mean, let's just say bushels. So you harvested 100 bushels of wheat. Okay, so the first 2 bushels go to a Kohen. They go to a priest as teruma. And likewise, if you're a shepherd and you're going to shear your sheep, the first 2% of the shearings goes to a priest. Right? This is when tithing is in effect in the land of Israel. So what they're saying is what you owe to the priest, right, is raw wool, right? Just the shearings. Not spun wool or washed wool or wool sweaters or etc., just the raw wool. So if the owner of the sheep did not manage to give the sheared wool to the priest before he dyed it, he is exempt from giving it to the priest, as the obligation is in effect only with regard to wool remaining in its original state. By contrast, if he washed it but did not dye it, he is obligated to give it to the priest. This indicates that the washing does not affect a significant change. Note that they're not saying that if you sheared all your sheep and then you hurried up, right, and dyed all of the wool, oh, well, I guess the priests aren't going to get anything. No, what's happened is that particular wool that you dyed, you're not going to take from it to give to the priest. But you have sinned, right? You have transgressed the obligation to give teruma to a priest. Not teruma because it's not for eating, but still it's a tithe. And so what is going to happen? Like you have shirked on your obligation. You're going to have to atone for that, and you're still obligated to give the priest what you owe. But that part of it is a discussion for another day. The point is that when you have an obligation to make a restitution or to make a tithing, right, it's in its raw state. If you then change it into something else, you're going to have to fulfill your obligation with money or from another place, not with the thing that you changed. So Abaye said, this is not difficult. This brisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, whereas that Mishna is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis. As it is taught in a brisa with regard to the first of the sheared wool, if one sheared it, spun it, and wove it, the sheared wool does not combine with the wool from other sheep to constitute the minimum quantity of wool for which one is obligated to give the first of the sheared wool to the priest. If one washed it, then Rabbi Shimon says that it does not combine with the wool of the other sheep, as washing affects a significant change. And the rabbis say that it does combine with the wool of other sheep, as washing does not affect a significant change. And their opinions their opinions correspond to the opinions in the Baraisa and Mishna previously quoted. So Rava stated a different answer. This and that, i.e. both the Mishna and the Baraisa, are in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, and it is still not difficult. This Mishna is referring to a case where one untangled the strands of wool by hand before washing it. In this case, the washing is not fully effective and does not affect a significant change. That Baraisa is referring to a case where one combed it before washing it, and the washing is more effective, and consequently, it affects a significant change. So Rabbi Chia bar Avin stated a different answer. He said this Mishnah is referring to a case where one merely whitened it, which is not significant, and that Baraisa is referring to a case where one bleached it with sulfur, which is significant. Again, we're talking about if the thief stole something, right? And then he, does some procedure with what he stole. So if he causes a significant change to what he stole, then the restitution he makes is with money to make the victim of the theft whole by paying the amount that what was stolen was worth at the time of the robbery, plus 20%. But if the thing that he stole has not undergone a significant change, then the way to make restitution is to return what you took, plus 20%, presumably in money value. Now, having demonstrated that according to Rabbi Shimon, washing affects a significant change, the Gemara asks now that it can be said that according to Rabbi Shimon, dye, right, color dye, does not affect a significant change, as the Gemara will prove. Can it be said that washing affects a significant change? As it is taught in Baraisa, if he sheared sheep one by one and dyed the wool of each sheep before shearing the next sheep, or sheared them one by one and spun the wool, or sheared them one by one and wove the wool, then the wool sheared from the different sheep does not combine to constitute the minimum quantity of wool for which one is obligated to give the first of the sheared wool to the priest. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, even if he dyed it, it combines with the other wool. And this indicates that according to Rabbi Shimon, even dyeing the wool is not a significant change. So how could he maintain that washing it is a significant change? I'm almost done. Questions or comments? Please get them in now. So Abaye said, La Kashya, this is not difficult. This statement that washed wool does not combine with other wool, this is the opinion of the rabbis in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. While that statement that even dyed wool combines with other wool is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. So there is a dispute as to what Rabbi Shimon rules with regard to this issue, right? Not just that he had a dispute with the rabbis, but there's a later dispute about what he actually said. So Rava said, actually the rabbis do not disagree with Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, and they are also the opinion that Rabbi Shimon holds that washing does affect a significant change, and as for the apparent contradiction, dye is different, and it does not affect a significant change since one is able to remove it with soap. and return the wool to its previous undyed color. And when it is taught there in the Mishna cited above that if one did not manage to give the sheared wool to the priest before he dyed it, he is exempt from giving that particular shearing. And this ruling was before he's exempt, and this ruling was established in accordance with all opinions. It was not stated with regard to ordinary dye, but with regard to indigo, which cannot be removed with soap, and therefore it does affect a permanent and significant change. That's what I've got for us today. Looks like 2 comments. The first is from Jonathan. There's a great link in Sefaria.org for rather to be the pursued like pigeons and doves than to be the pursuer. And the link is there from Rambam that lists the qualities of a Torah sage. I won't post it here since it is long, but it is worth bookmarking. So there you go. You see it in the comments. Bill says, I can also imagine in terms of the rancher who had a pregnant cow stolen, that they could argue that they were intentionally raising the cow for the sake of the calf, whether as a breeding project or to ensure the cow would give milk, etc. It doesn't change the fact that we want the robber to repent and atone, of course. But I can imagine the victim here being candidly incensed that the law would let the robber keep the calf. Bearing this in mind, and that the rabbinic courts always existed alongside other courts, usually that of the king, that the practical outcome of the law is going to be that while the robber is incentivized to repent under the Torah law, the victim is paradoxically incentivized to go to a civil or royal court instead of the Beis Din. Very interesting point, right? And generally speaking, like nowadays, most litigation is being done in the civil courts. And it's because, more or less you can count on, if you live in America, that you're going to get, fair treatment in American courts. And it's not going to go badly for you because you're a Jew, we hope. But, in other times and places, the Jewish community really did not want to submit itself or its members to, Gentile courts, which is a very dangerous undertaking. It could go very bad. They were much more likely to, keep matters in-house, as it were. And thank God we live in a time, where we don't have that mistrust of the courts, generally. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Monday, at the regular time, 6 p.m.